The crimson sky of Antella bled into the horizon as Vyessa pressed her misshapen form against the cold metal of the abandoned structure. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the uneven expansion of her chest cavity causing sharp pains with each inhalation. The year 2357 had not been kind to her, but then again, no year had defective, aberrant, unworthy. The words of the religious council echoed in her mind as she ran her six-fingered hand over the surface of a broken mirror she'd found among the debris. The reflection that stared back was fragmented just like her. One iridescent eye too large, the other small and clouded, skin that shifted between translucent and opaque in uneven patches. Bones that had grown at unnatural angles beneath her lilac flesh. Bastion City rose in the distance, its perfect spires reaching into the atmosphere. Organic architecture pulsing with bioluminescence as night approached. From this vantage point in the wastelands, Vyessa could see the separation between the gleaming upper echelons and the darker lower levels. A society as stratified as the very volcanic rock upon which it was built. "They call this exile," she whispered to herself, voice modulating between octaves involuntarily, another genetic flaw. "I call it freedom." But freedom came with a price in the wasteland borders of Bastion. The magma flows were unpredictable, the electromagnetic storms deadly, and rogue drones from the city occasionally swept the area for undesirables like her. Antellans prided themselves on biological perfection. Their technological advances in biotechnology had created a society where imperfection was not merely discouraged, it was systematically eliminated. A distant rumble drew Vyessa's attention skyward. Something was entering the atmosphere not in the controlled manner of Antellan ships, but in a chaotic, flaming descent. The object carved a burning path through the dusk, a meteor of metal and fire, before crashing with explosive force into the magma field several kilometers away. Curiosity overrode caution. Vyessa gathered her meager Supplisa filtration device for water, a small energy cell, and the broken mirror and set out toward the crash site. Her malformed leg dragged slightly as she moved, but years of adapting to her body's limitations had made her surprisingly agile. As she approached the crash, the heat from nearby magma flows warmed her sensitive skin uncomfortably. Through the shimmer of rising heat, she could make out the unmistakable form of a spacecraft, but not of Antellan design. The craft was smaller, more angular, with markings she didn't recognize. A sound from within the wreckage froze her in place. Someone had survived. Vyessa hesitated. Contact with others inevitably led to disgust, fear, or worsepity. But as the groaning metal shifted and a pained cry emanated from inside, something compelled her forward. The ship's emergency hatch had been partially ejected. Vyessa pried it open further, her enhanced strength one of the few advantages of her genetic anomalies making the task possible. Smoke poured out, and with it, a form tumbled to the ground at her feet. A human. Vyessa had only seen them in historical archives, remnants of data from before Earth's devastation. This one was male, from what she could determine. His exosuit was damaged, helmet cracked, and blood red, so different from her own purple fluid seeped from a gash on his forehead. His eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on her face. She braced herself for the horror, the recoil that always came when others beheld her. Instead, he spoke, his voice rough from smoke inhalation. "You're not what I expected to see on this planet. And neither are you," Vyessa replied, her voice shifting mid-sentence from alto to soprano. He winced, attempting to sit up. "Name's Elias, human exploration vessel. Was mapping the outer systems when my drive malfunctioned. You're on Antella, planet of the perfect," she said with bitter irony. "Except for me." His eyes a startling blue scanned her form with curiosity rather than revulsion. I'm guessing you're not the welcoming committee. A warning signal caught Vyasa's attention. The magma flow was shifting, destabilizing the ground beneath the spacecraft. We need to move, now! As if to punctuate her words. A geyser of molten rock erupted nearby, sending droplets of liquid fire raining down around them. Elias attempted to stand but collapsed, his leg clearly injured in the crash. Without thinking, Vysa hoisted him up, supporting his weight. They stumbled away from the ship just as the ground beneath it gave way, sending it sinking slowly into the magma pool. My ship, Elias cried out. Your life is worth more, Vysa replied, dragging him further from danger. Though on this planet, that's debatable. They retreated to higher ground, to the abandoned structure Vysa had been using as shelter. Once inside, she helped Elias to sit against a wall, then retreated to the shadows. Suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. Thank you, he said, examining his injured leg. You saved my life. Don't thank me yet. Being stranded on Antella might be worse than a quick death. She stayed in the shadows, only her larger eye gleaming in the dim light. I've survived worse odds. He attempted a smile, then grimaced in pain. I didn't catch your name. Vysa, she hesitated. Why aren't you afraid, disgusted? By what? By me. She stepped forward into a shaft of fading light that streamed through a crack in the ceiling. By this, Elias studied her for a long moment, taking in her asymmetrical features, the uneven limbs, the skin that pulsed with irregular bioluminescence. I've been to 17 planets, seen beings you couldn't imagine. Beauty takes many forms. Vysa laughed, a sound like broken glass. Not on Antella. Here, beauty is uniformity, perfection. Sounds boring, Elias replied, tearing a strip from his undersuit to bind his wounded leg. So, are you going to tell me why you're out here alone in the wasteland? Exile. The religious council determined I was unfit for Antallon's society, a genetic aberration. She touched her larger eye. Failed bioengineering experiment. They exiled you for how you look. For what I am. Defective. They fear I'll contaminate the genetic purity they've cultivated for generations. She turned away. They're not wrong to fear me. My very existence challenges their belief in perfection. Where I come from, Elias said quietly, difference isn't always seen as a defect. Earth, the planet you destroyed through war and environmental collapse. Vyasa's tone was sharp. Fair point, he conceded them, but we learned the hard way. The human colonies that survived are different now. A distant whirring sound caused Vysa to stiffen. Drones, patrol drones from the city. She moved quickly to seal the entrance to their shelter. They must have detected your crash. Will they find us here? Possibly. The religious enforcers are persistent when it comes to purging impurities. She glanced at him. And you, human, are the ultimate impurity in their eyes. As night fell fully over the wasteland, Vysa and Elias huddled in the darkness of the abandoned structure. The patrol drones passed overhead, searchlights scanning the terrain. Eventually, the mechanical whirring faded into the distance. We should be safe until morning, Vysa said, activating a small bioluminescent lampa remnant of Antallon technology she'd salvaged. In its soft glow, Elias studied her with undisguised fascination. You said you were a failed experiment. What did that mean? Vysa was silent for so long that Elias thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and even a conscious effort to control its natural fluctuations. My parents were geneticists. They believed they could push Antallon evolution forward. create adaptations that would allow us to survive in more hostile environments. I was their project. She looked down at her six-fingered hands. When the religious council discovered their unsanctioned experiments, my parents were executed for heresy. I was 9. I'm sorry, Elias said softly. The council decided I might still have research value. They placed me in a laboratory, under the supervision of Dr. Thelsis. For years, I was studied, modified, tested. Her voice cracked. When I turned 18, a new faction took control of the council. They deemed the experiments unethical not because of my suffering, but because they feared the results. I was released into the lowest level of Bastion, expected to die quietly. But you didn't. A faint smile crossed her asymmetrical features. No. I learned to survive. Found others like me, though none as severely altered. We formed a community in the shadows. For 5 years, we existed, hidden from the upper levels. Her expression darkened. Until Anthelis found us. Anthelis? Religious enforcer. He led the purge of our community. Most were captured or killed. I escaped to the wasteland. That was a year ago. She turned the broken mirror in her hands. I'm the last, as far as I know. Elias shifted, wincing as he adjusted his injured leg. And now you're stuck babysitting a crashed human. Better than being alone with my reflection, she replied, setting the mirror face down. We'll find a way off this planet, Elias said with determination. My ship may be gone, but I have an emergency beacon. If it survived the crash, my people will come looking. Your optimism is one I'm unfamiliar, Vyessa said, though not unkindly. Then rest. Your body needs to heal. As Elias drifted into an uneasy sleep, Vyessa kept watch, her enhanced vision allowing her to see clearly in the near darkness. She studied the human's face, so different from Antlion features yet strangely compelling. There was a resilience to him that resonated with something deep within her. She wondered what it would be like to belong to a species that didn't cast aside its broken members. Morning came with a haze of red dust that filtered the sun's rays into a bloody glow. Vyessa had ventured out at first light, returning with her makeshift bag filled with materials salvaged from Elias's crashed ship. Your beacon survived, she announced, placing the device beside him. But it's damaged. The power cell is cracked. Elias examined it, his expression falling. Without power, it's useless. Perhaps not. Vyessa revealed an Antlion energy cell. This might be compatible. Different technology, but similar principles. You know about power systems? I know about survival, she replied, and adaptation. Together, they worked to integrate the Antlion cell with the human technology. Elias's technical knowledge complemented Vyessa's understanding of her world's biotechnology. By midday, the beacon emitted a faint pulse. It's working, Elias exclaimed. Weak signal, but it's working. How long before your people find you? Days, maybe weeks. He looked at her with sudden concern. Will you be safe that long? The drones? I've evaded them for a year, Vyessa said, though uncertainty edged her voice. But with a human presence, they'll increase their sweeps. Antlions fear outside contamination even more than internal impurity. Then we'll need better shelter, somewhere to hide until rescue comes. Elias attempted to stand, using the wall for support. His injured leg trembled but held his weight. There are cave systems in the volcanic rock formations to the north, Vyessa suggested. Natural interference from mineral deposits might hide us from scanners. Lead the way, Elias said, fashioning a crude crutch from debris. I may be slower, but I'll keep up. They set out across the wasteland, staying close to ridges and rock formations for cover. Vyessa moved with surprising grace despite her asymmetrical limbs, occasionally doubling back to help Elias navigate difficult terrain. The red sun beat down mercilessly, and twice they had to take shelter as patrol drones passed overhead. "Tell me about Earth," Vyessa said during one of their rest periods. "The archives say it was once beautiful." "It was," Elias replied, his eyes distant with memory. "Oceans that stretched beyond sight. Forests so dense you could walk for days in green shadows. Mountains that scraped the sky. What happened? We happened. Wars over resources, environmental collapse. The final catalyst was the dark winter nuclear exchange that triggered a climate catastrophe." He sighed. "Those who could fled to colony ships. The rest adapted or perished. Yet humanity survived. Some of us changed, humbled." He looked at her. "We learned that difference and adaptation are strengths, not weaknesses. That perfection is a dead end." "The Antlion Council would disagree," Vyessa said bitterly. "The Antlion Council isn't here." Elias reached out, hesitating before gently touching her six-fingered hand. "But we are." The simple contact sent a jolt through Vyessa. How long had it been since someone had touched her without clinical detachment or disgust? She withdrew her hand quickly, unaccustomed to the sensation. "The caves are just beyond that ridge," she said, changing the subject. "We should reach them before sunset." As they crested the ridge, the cave system came into view, dark openings in the face of a towering cliff of black volcanic rock. But Vyessa froze, pulling Elias down beside her. "Enforcers," she whispered, pointing to the sleek silver vehicles parked at the base of the cliff. "They've already found the area." "How? The beacon signal is too weak for them to detect." "They're not looking for your signal," Vyessa realized with sudden clarity. "They're looking for me. Antheles must have tracked me this far." Even as she spoke, a figure emerged from one of the cave entrance stall, clad in the silver-white uniform of a religious enforcer. Despite the distance, Vyessa recognized him immediately. "Antheles," she breathed, a complex mixture of emotions in her voice. "You know him personally?" Elias asked, noting her reaction. "He was a friend, once, before he joined the enforcers." Her voice held a sadness deeper than mere fear. "Now he hunts me with more determination than any other. We need an alternative plan," Elias said, scanning the horizon. "Somewhere they wouldn't expect." Vyessa's gaze shifted to the distant skyline of Bastion City. "There is one place. The old research facility where I was held. It's been abandoned since the council faction change, deemed too contaminated by the previous experiments. They wouldn't look for you in your own prison." Elias nodded. "Smart. It's dangerous. There might still be active security systems." "Even more dangerous than staying here?" Elias gestured toward the enforcers, who were now setting up what appeared to be scanning equipment. "A point taken." Vyessa helped him up. "We'll have to circle wide around them. It will add hours to our journey." "I'm not going anywhere without you," Elias said with quiet determination. "Lead on." They retreated down the ridge, taking a circuitous route that kept them hidden from the enforcer's position. The journey was arduous, especially for Elias with his injured leg, but he never complained. As night fell, the distant lights of Bastion City grew closer, the magnificent spires now looming over them like judgmental fingers pointing to the stars. "The facility is on the outer edge of the lower city," Vyessa explained as they rested in the shadow of a derelict processing plant. "We'll need to pass through a maintenance tunnel to avoid the population centers." "Will there be people in the tunnels?" "Only outcasts, those deemed imperfect but not severe enough for exile. They survive in the margins, ignored by the upper levels. She glanced at him. Keep your head covered. Even in the lower levels, a human would cause panic. Using scraps of material from his damaged exosuit, Elias fashioned a crude hood. Vesa led him to a corroded access panel, her enhanced strength allowing her to pry it open. The tunnel beyond was dimly lit by sporadic bioluminescent fungi that clung to the walls. "Stay close," she whispered as they entered the claustrophobic passage. The tunnels are a maze. They moved through the dark arteries beneath Bastion City, occasionally passing huddled forms that shrank away from their approach. Twice they had to hide as maintenance drones hummed past. The air grew thicker, heavy with the scent of organic decay and recycled moisture. "How much further?" Elias asked, his breathing labored in the oppressive atmosphere. "Almost there." The facility as Vesa stopped abruptly, pulling Elias into a recessed alcove. A group of figures approached, their forms illuminated by handheld biolamps. Unlike the wretched tunnel dwellers they had passed, these moved with purpose, their garments a mix of scavenged Antlion technology and crude modifications. "Bastion rebels," Vesa whispered. "Dissenters who oppose the religious council, dangerous in their own way." The rebels passed within meters of their hiding place. 1. A female Antlion with minor deformities, a slightly elongated neck and webbed fingers paused, turning her head in their direction. "Who's there?" she called, raising her lamp. Vesa stepped forward before Elias could stop her. "A fellow outcast." The rebel's eyes widened as the light fell on Vesa's features. "The geneticist's daughter," she breathed. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet," Vesa replied cautiously. "Though the enforcers are trying to remedy that." The rebel introduced herself as Mira. "We've been tracking enforcer movements. They've tripled their patrols in the wasteland, searching for something." Her gaze shifted to Elias, partially visible behind Vesa. "Or someone. We need to reach the old research facility," Vesa said, ignoring the implied question. Mira's expression darkened. "That place is death. The council sealed it after the purge. It's also the last place they'd look for me." After a moment's consideration, Mira nodded. "We can guide you through a safer route. The main access is watched, but there's a service entrance that was overlooked in the sealing process." Elias stepped forward, lowering his hood. "Thank you." Mira startled at the sight of him, her hand moving instinctively to a weapon at her belt. "A human? Here?" "He crashed in the wasteland," Vesa explained quickly. "He's no threat." "The council would disagree," Mira said, but relaxed her posture slightly. "Though the council's enemies might be our friends." She gestured to the other rebels. "We'll escort you, but after that, you're on your own." The rebel group led them through a complex series of turns and hidden passages, eventually emerging into a section of the lower city that appeared abandoned. Crumbling structures loomed around them, their once gleaming surfaces now dulled and pitted with corrosion. "The contamination zone," Mira explained. After the faction change, the council declared this entire district biologically hazardous, a convenient way to erase their previous work. At the center of the zone stood a structure unlike the others, a perfect dome of black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "At the facility," Vesa said, her voice hollow. "My home for 9 years." Mira pointed to a small maintenance structure attached to the dome's perimeter. "The service entrance is through there. The power is minimal emergency systems only, but it should provide shelter." "Why are you helping us?" Elias asked. Mira's gaze lingered on Vesa. "Because she represents what the council fears most, proof that their definition of perfection is arbitrary, a living challenge to their authority." She turned to Vaesa. Many of us remember your parents' work. They believed adaptation and diversity were Antella's future, not sterile uniformity. Their beliefs got them executed, Vaesa replied bitterly. Ideas don't die as easily as people, Mira countered. Be careful in there, and if you survive, find us. The rebellion could use someone who understands council biotechnology. With that, Mira and her group melted back into the shadows of the abandoned district, leaving Vaesa and Elias alone before the imposing facility. Are you ready for this? Elias asked gently, sensing Vaesa's tension. No, she admitted, but we have no choice. The service entrance was secured with a biometric lock standard Antlan technology that scanned for approved genetic signatures. Vaesa placed her palm against it, her expression a mixture of hope and dread. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hum, the lock illuminated green. It still recognizes me, she said with surprise, after all this time. You were their prize specimen, Elias said grimly. Of course they kept you in the system. The door slid open, revealing a dark corridor beyond. The air that wafted out was stale but breathable. Vaesa activated a small biolamp, casting eerie shadows as they entered the facility that had once been her prison. Emergency lighting flickered to life as they progressed deeper into the structure, responding to their movement. The corridors were clinically sterile, designed with the flowing organic lines typical of Antlan architecture, but somehow colder, more utilitarian. My quarters were in the eastern section, Vaesa said, her voice echoing slightly in the empty hallways. The main laboratory was central, under the apex of the dome. Where would be safest? Elias asked, his makeshift crutch tapping a lonely rhythm on the polished floor. Nowhere is truly safe here, she replied. But the secondary research labs had independent environmental controls. If they're still operational, they won't register on the facility's main systems. They made their way through the labyrinthine complex, passing rooms filled with abandoned equipment and others that had been stripped bare. Vaesa moved as if in a trance, memories flooding back with each familiar corridor. Here, she said finally, stopping before a nondescript door. Secondary Lab 3. It was used for less invasive procedures. The room beyond was smaller than the main laboratory, but still substantial. Workstations lined the walls, their surfaces covered with dust. Examination tables and medical equipment stood in eerie silence, preserved like artifacts from a forgotten era. Elias limped to one of the workstations, brushing away dust to reveal controls. Some systems are still online, minimal power but enough for basic functions. Vaesa moved to a storage unit, finding it unlocked. Inside were basic medical supplies, not the advanced biotechnology that had been used on her, but standard first aid materials. We can treat your leg properly now, she said, gathering supplies. As she helped Elias onto an examination table and began cleaning his wound, he studied her face in the dim light. This must be difficult for you, being back here. Every day on Antella is difficult for me, she replied, focusing on her task. At least here, I understand the nature of the threat. What did they do to you in this place? He asked softly. Vaesa's hands stilled. They tried to fix me, then they tried to use me. When neither worked to their satisfaction, they tried to understand me. She resumed bandaging his leg with precise movements. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was being treated as a puzzle to solve rather than a person. I'm sorry, Elias said, the simple words carrying the weight of genuine empathy. Don't be. Without their experiments, I wouldn't have survived the wasteland. Ironic, isn't it? The very modifications they made to study environmental adaptation actually helped me adapt. She secured the bandage. There. Better than a makeshift binding. Elias tested his leg, finding the pain significantly reduced. "Thank you. We should rest while we can," Vyasa suggested, moving to secure the lab's door. "The beacon needs time to gather strength, and you need to heal." As Elias made himself as comfortable as possible on the examination table, Vysa found herself drawn to a computer terminal that still showed signs of life. Her fingers hovered over the interface, hesitant. "What is it?" Elias asked, noting her reaction. This was Dr. Thelsis's workstation. She was kinder than the others. She actually talked to me, explained what they were doing. Vysa activated the terminal. If any records of the experiment survived the purge, they would be in her files. The screen illuminated with Antlan's script, requesting authentication. Without thinking, Vysa spoke her designation number, the identity she had been assigned in the facility. The computer recognized her voice pattern, granting access. "She left me a back door," Vysa realized, surprised. All this time I could have accessed her records. Files populated the screen years of research data, medical records, and personal notes. Vysa began searching through them, her expression growing increasingly troubled as she read. "What have you found?" Elias asked, propping himself up. "The truth," Vysa replied, her voice barely audible. "About why I was really created." The files revealed that her parents hadn't been rogue geneticists pursuing theoretical evolution. They had been military scientists, commissioned by a previous council faction to develop Antlands who could survive extreme conditions. Potential colonizers for hostile worlds. The project had been named Vanguard, and Vysa subject V-37 had been one of dozens of genetically modified embryos. "I wasn't a failed experiment," she said, her voice hollow. "I was a successful prototype. My defects are actually adaptations, enhanced strength, vision calibrated for low-light environments, respiratory system modified for thin atmospheres." "But the council turned against the project," Elias surmised. "A religious faction gained control. They deemed the modifications heretical, an affront to the perfect Antlan form." She continued reading, her larger eye widening. "But they didn't destroy all the research. They continued it in secret, refining the process, creating better versions without the aesthetic compromises." A file labeled Vanguard Prime caught her attention. Opening it revealed images that made her physically recoil in Antlan form similar to her own, but perfected. The asymmetry corrected, the irregularities smoothed into powerful functionality. "They're still making more," she whispered. "Using my genetic template as a foundation but eliminating the visible differences. Why would they continue in secret what they publicly condemned?" Elias asked. "E-power," Vysa replied, scrolling through more files. "The religious faction preaches perfection to control the population, but they want the advantages of adaptation for themselves. They're creating the perfect warriors Antelans who can survive anywhere, conquer anything." Her search revealed something else, a location. The project was moved to a facility beneath the religious council's central temple. "That's why Anthelis has been hunting me so relentlessly. I'm not just an embarrassment to be eliminated. I'm living proof of their hypocrisy." The revelation settled over them like a physical weight. Vysa stood motionless before the screen, her entire understanding of her existence transforming. "What will you do with this information?" Elias asked finally. "I don't know," she admitted. "The rebels would use it against the council, but that could trigger civil war. Innocent Antelans would suffer. And if you do nothing? Then the council creates their perfect soldiers, and no world is safe from Antelan expansion." She turned to him, conflict evident in her mismatched eyes. "Including what remains of Earth." Before Elias could respond, an alarm shattered the silence, a high-pitched wail that resonated throughout the facility. "They've found us," Vyasa said, moving quickly to the door. "The facility's security system must have alerted them when we accessed restricted files. We need to move," Elias said, sliding off the examination table, testing his bandaged leg. "There's a maintenance shaft that leads to the surface," Vyasa said, gathering their meager supplies. "If we can reach it before they secure the facility..." The door to the lab slid open, revealing a squad of religious enforcers, their silver-white uniforms gleaming under the emergency lights. At their center stood Anthelis, his perfect Antlion features set in an expression of cold triumph. "Subject V-37, he said, addressing Vyasa by her designation rather than her name. "Your contamination of this sacred facility is at an end." His gaze shifted to Elias. "And you've brought an alien abomination with you. The Council will be most interested." "The only abomination here is your hypocrisy, Anthelis," Vyasa replied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I know about Vanguard Prime, about what you're really doing beneath the temple." A flicker of surprise crossed Anthelis's face, quickly masked. Desperate lies from a desperate aberration. Then why hunt me so persistently? One exile in the wasteland shouldn't merit such attention from the Religious Council's chief enforcer. Anthelis signaled to his squad, who raised their weapons' non-lethal stun devices designed to incapacitate without permanent damage. "You will both come with us, the human for questioning about his presence on Antella, and you, V-37, for proper processing." "We're not going anywhere with you," Elias said, shifting to stand protectively beside Vyasa. "Your mobility is compromised, human. And while V-37 possesses certain enhancements, she is outnumbered and outmatched." Anthelis stepped forward. "There is no scenario where you leave this facility except in our custody." What happened next occurred so quickly that even Vyasa's enhanced reflexes barely registered the sequence of events. Elias lunged forward, not at Anthelis but at the control panel beside the door. His fingers flew across the interface not randomly, but with the precision of someone who understood the underlying principles of the technology. The lights in the lab surged, then died, plunging the room into darkness. The emergency systems kicked in seconds later, but by then, Vyasa had acted. Using her strength and night vision, she overturned a heavy equipment cabinet, creating a barrier between them and the enforcers. "The shaft," she hissed, pulling Elias toward a maintenance panel in the rear wall. The enforcers fired their stun weapons, the energy bolts dissipating harmlessly against the upturned cabinet. Vyasa wrenched the maintenance panel open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. "Ugo!" she urged Elias, who squeezed into the opening despite his injured leg. As she prepared to follow, a voice stopped her, not Anthelis's commanding tone, but softer, almost pleading. "Vyasa?" She turned. Anthelis had moved to the side of the barricade, his weapon lowered. For a brief moment, she saw past the enforcer to the friend he had once been. "It doesn't have to be this way," he said. "Return to the Council willingly. Accept the corrections they offer. You could be perfect, like the others." "Perfect," she echoed. "Like a weapon, a tool for conquest?" "Like an Antlion," he insisted, "worthy of your heritage." "I am worthy," Vyasa replied, backing toward the shaft. "Not despite my differences, but because of them. You taught me that once, before you became their puppet." "I was naive then," Anthelis said, his expression hardening. "I didn't understand the importance of purity, and I didn't understand the value of freedom." With that, Vyasa slipped into the maintenance shaft, sealing the panel behind her. The passage was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for them to crawl through single file. Elias led the way, his injured leg making progress slow but steady. Behind them, they could hear the enforcers attempting to breach the sealed panel. "How did you know how to override the lab systems?" Vyasa asked as they crawled through the dusty shaft. The principles aren't that different from human technology, Elias replied. And I've had some experience with emergency overrides on exploration vessels. The shaft eventually opened into a larger maintenance tunnel, allowing them to stand. Distant alarms indicated that the facility was on full lockdown, but this forgotten passage seemed to have escaped the security protocols. Where does this lead? Elias asked, leaning against the wall to rest his leg. If I remember correctly, to a ventilation outlet near the edge of the contamination zone. Vyasa peered ahead into the dimly lit tunnel. From there, we can try to reach the rebels. They're our only chance now. And the beacon? My people won't know where to find us if we're not at the research facility. Vyasa hesitated, then reached into her makeshift bag and withdrew the device. It's still transmitting. But you're right, we need to ensure they can locate us. She thought for a moment. The rebels have communication equipment. If we can boost the signal. They continued through the maintenance tunnel, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them. After what seemed like hours of navigating the claustrophobic passage, they reached a grated opening that looked out onto the desolate landscape of the contamination zone. Vyasa pried the grate loose, and they emerged into the perpetual twilight of Bastion's lower levels. In the distance, the gleaming spires of the upper city reached toward the red sky, oblivious to the struggle taking place in their shadow. We need to find Mira and the others, Vyasa said, surveying their surroundings. The rebel hideout can't be far. How will we find them? Elias asked. They didn't exactly leave a map. They wouldn't need to. Vyasa pointed to a subtle marking on a nearby Wallace symbol that resembled an Antlan eye, but with a jagged pupil like a broken mirror. Their sign. We follow these. The rebel markings led them through the abandoned district, each symbol pointing the way to the next like breadcrumbs through a labyrinth. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a collapsed building, its entrance blocked by debris. Vyasa approached a section of the rubble and pressed her hand against a seemingly random stone. A hidden panel slid aside, revealing a biometric scanner similar to the one at the research facility. Will it recognize you? Elias asked. No, Vyasa replied, but it will recognize what I am. She placed her palm on the scanner. After a moment, the device emitted a soft tone, and a section of the debris shifted, revealing a concealed entrance. Genetic recognition, she explained. Not of individuals, but of marker signs of modification. Only those rejected by Antlan society can enter. They descended into the rebel hideout, a vast underground complex that had once been part of Bastion's original infrastructure. Unlike the sterile perfection of the upper city, this place was a chaotic blend of scavenged technology and makeshift living spaces. Dozens of Antalans moved about, each bearing some form of imperfection that had cast them from society minor deformities, irregular coloration, signs of genetic drift. Mira approached as they entered, surprise evident on her features. You escaped the facility? Impressive. Her gaze shifted to Elias's bandaged leg. And you've received medical attention. We found more than medical supplies, Vyasa said urgently. Information about why the enforcers hunt me so relentlessly. In a secure chamber deep within the rebel hideout, Vyasa shared what they had discovered: the Vanguard Project, its religious condemnation, and its secret continuation. Mira and the rebel leaders listened with growing alarm. This confirms our suspicions, Mira said when Vyasa had finished. The Council has been developing something beneath the temple. Our informants reported unusual security, materials that couldn't be accounted for. They're creating the perfect soldiers, Vyasa said. Using my genetic template as a foundation, but eliminating the visible markers of modification. Weapons that look like perfect Antilons, one of the rebel leaders added grimly. The population would never resist them. We need to expose this hypocrisy. Another urged. If the people knew their religious leaders were creating the very abominations they condemn, it could trigger civil war. Vaesa interrupted. Is that what you want? We want freedom, Mira replied, for all Antilons, even those deemed imperfect. Elias, who had been silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. There's another consideration. If these perfect soldiers are deployed beyond Antilato other worlds, the consequences could be devastating. The human speaks truth, Mira acknowledged. This threatens more than just our society. Then what do we do? Vaesa asked. The facility beneath the temple will be heavily guarded. Even with your numbers, a direct assault would fail. Not an assault, Mira said thoughtfully. An infiltration. She turned to Vaesa. You said the system still recognized you, that you were in their genetic database. Yes, but... Vaesa's eyes widened as she understood Mira's implication. You want me to go back, to let them capture me. To let them think they've captured you, Mira corrected. With the right preparation, you could access the central facility from within. That's suicide, Elias protested. They'll recognize her deception immediately. Not necessarily, one of the rebel technicians interjected. We've developed methods to mask biosignatures temporarily, enough to fool initial scans. The rebels outlined their plan. Vaesa would allow herself to be captured near the temple district. Once inside the facility, she would use her genetic access to gather evidence of the Vanguard Prime project and transmit it to the rebels, who would broadcast it throughout Bastion. And my beacon? Elias asked. My people will be searching for me. We can boost the signal, Mira assured him. Direct it toward the upper atmosphere where it's more likely to be detected. As the rebels dispersed to prepare, Elias pulled Vaesa aside. This is too dangerous when they're asking you to walk into the center of the people who want you dead. Who want me erased, Vaesa corrected. There's a difference. They need my genetic material intact, my brain functioning. They won't kill me immediately. That's not as reassuring as you think it is, Elias said dryly. Let me come with you. Impossible. A human would never get past the outer security. She touched his arm gently. Your leg is still healing. Stay here. Make sure your beacon is transmitted. Your people need to know what's happening on Antella. I didn't survive a crash landing and enforcer pursuit just to let you face this alone, he insisted. You won't be, Mira interrupted, approaching with a small device. This subdermal transmitter will allow us to track your location and vital signs. If you're in danger, we'll know. The preparations continued through what passed for night in the lower levels of Bastion. The rebels provided Vaesa with specialized equipment designed to bypass Antillon security systems, and the subdermal transmitter was carefully implanted beneath her skin where scanners were least likely to detect it. As dawn approached, Vaesa prepared to leave. Dressed in the simple garments of a lower-level worker, she looked almost like any other Antillon if one didn't look too closely at her asymmetrical features. Elias stood before her, his expression a complex mixture of concern and admiration. Promise me you'll be careful. I'm always careful, she replied with a faint smile. It's how I've survived this long. When my people arrive, I'll tell them everything, about the Vanguard project, about what the Council is doing. Earth might be wounded, but we still have resources, allies. We won't let Antella become a threat to other worlds. First, we have to expose the truth, Vaesa said. The ordinary Antillans deserve to know what's being done in the name of their perfection. They stood in silence for a moment, neither quite able to find the right words for a farewell that might be permanent. Finally, Elias spoke. From the moment I crashed on this planet, you've shown me more humanity than I've seen in many humans. Whatever happens, remember that. Humanity, Vyessa echoed, tasting the word. Is that what this feeling is? This refusal to accept what seems inevitable? That's part of it, Elias said with a smile. The rest is harder to explain. Impulsively, Vyessa reached out, taking his hand in her six-fingered grip. If I don't return, tell your people that not all Antillans are like the Council. Many of us just want to live in peace, to be accepted as we are. You'll tell them yourself, Elias insisted. I'll be waiting when you get back. With that promise lingering between them, Vyessa departed, ascending to the surface where she would begin her dangerous mission. The rebels would monitor her progress from their hideout, ready to broadcast any evidence she uncovered. Elias watched her go, a human far from home, standing among the outcasts of an alien world, united by the universal experience of being deemed other by those in power. In the shadowed streets of the Temple District, Vyessa moved with purposeful vulnerability, making herself visible to the patrol drones that constantly swept the area. It didn't take long before she was spotted, the drones converging on her position with mechanical precision. She offered no resistance as the enforcers arrived, their stun weapons trained on her with cold efficiency. Subject V-37, the lead enforcer announced. You are ordered to surrender for processing. I surrender, Vyessa replied, raising her hands. I'm tired of running. They bound her with energy restraints and transported her in a sealed vehicle to the Temple Complex, a massive structure of gleaming white material that dominated the central district of Bastion City. Unlike the organic architecture of the rest of the city, the temple was angular, imposing, its surfaces reflecting the red sunlight with blinding intensity. Vyessa was taken not to a detention cell but directly to a laboratory deep beneath the temple's public areas. The facility was everything the rebels had feared, a vast complex dedicated to biotechnology far beyond what was officially acknowledged to exist on Antella. As she was led through sterile corridors, Vyessa carefully observed her surroundings, memorizing the layout, noting security measures. The transmitter beneath her skin hummed with imperceptible activity, relaying everything she saw back to the rebel hideout. Finally, she was brought to a chamber that made her blood run cold, a perfect replica of the laboratory where she had spent her childhood, down to the arrangement of the examination tables and monitoring equipment. Waiting for her was Anthelus, his perfect features set in an expression of satisfied triumph. Home at last, V-37, he said as the escorts withdrew, leaving them alone. Though I prefer to call you Vyessa, we were friends once, after all. Friends don't hunt each other across wastelands, she replied, testing the strength of her restraints subtly. I was trying to save you, Anthelus insisted, moving to a control panel. From exile, from suffering, from your own obsolescence. Obsolescence, Vyessa echoed. Is that what you call it when your prototype is no longer needed? Anthelus smiled thinly. So you know about Vanguard Prime. I know you condemn me as an abomination while secretly using my genetic template to create your perfect soldiers. Not soldiers, Anthelus corrected. Saviors, the future of our species. Antillans adapted to survive anywhere, to spread our perfection throughout the galaxy. He activated the control panel, and a section of the wall slid aside to reveal a stasis chamber. Inside floated an Antillan form female, like Vyessa, with similar proportions, but without any of the asymmetry or visible modifications that marked Vyessa as defective. This being was perfect in every way, her features serene in suspended animation. Beautiful, isn't she? Anthelus said with reverence. All of your adaptations, the enhanced strength, the specialized vision, the respiratory modifications, but without the aesthetic. compromises. She's a weapon, Vyessa said flatly. A tool. She's evolution guided by intelligence rather than chance. Anthelis countered. The religious council understands what your parents only glimpsed, that true perfection lies not in stasis but in perfect adaptation. Then why maintain the lie? Why persecute those with visible differences if adaptation is your goal? Anthelis approached, studying Vyessa's features with clinical detachment. Control. The masses need simple truths, clear divisions between right and wrong, perfect and imperfect. It gives them purpose, direction. It gives you power, Vyessa corrected. A power to guide our species to its destiny. He agreed without shame. And you, Vyessa, will help us complete that journey. I won't help you create weapons, she said firmly. You already have. Anthelis gestured to the sleeping form in the stasis chamber. Your genetic material, your adaptations, they're the foundation of Vanguard Prime. But there are still gaps, inconsistencies in the integration process. Your living brain holds the key to resolving those issues. With growing horror, Vyessa understood. You want to dissect me to complete your perfect soldier. Not dissection, Anthelis said, as if offended by the crudeness of the term. Neural mapping, destructive, yes, but necessary. Your sacrifice will ensure the success of Vanguard Prime. And if I refuse? Anthelis laughed softly. Refuse? You're restrained, isolated, surrounded by the most advanced security in Bastion. There is no refusal, only acceptance. As he spoke, technicians entered the laboratory, preparing equipment for the procedure. Vyessa was secured to an examination table. Her restraints tightened to prevent any movement. Your human companion, Anthelis said conversationally as the technicians worked. We'll find him eventually. His presence on Antella is an opportunity to study human physiology firsthand. Perhaps even integrate useful traits into future iterations of Vanguard. Leave him out of this, Vyessa growled, her voice modulating with emotion. Protective of the alien, how curious. Anthelis leaned closer. What is it about humans that inspires such loyalty? Their primitive technology? Their self-destructive history? Their capacity to see beyond appearances, Vyessa replied. To accept difference without fear, a luxury afforded by their inferiority. Anthelis dismissed. When one has already failed as a species, imperfection becomes unremarkable. As they spoke, Vyessa subtly tested her restraints, finding them unyielding. The transmitter beneath her skin continued its silent work, sending images and audio back to the rebel hideout. She needed to keep Anthelis talking, to gather as much evidence as possible before the procedure began. Show me, she said suddenly. Show me the full Vanguard Prime project. If I'm to be sacrificed for it, I deserve to understand what I'm dying for. Anthelis considered her request, then nodded. A reasonable final wish, and perhaps, seeing the perfection you've helped create will bring you peace. He directed the technicians to continue their preparations while he led Vyessa, still restrained but now mobileto, an adjacent chamber. What she saw there struck her with equal parts awe and horror. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the vast room, each containing a perfect Antlan form. Hundreds of them, identical in their flawlessness, suspended in dreamless sleep. The first generation, Anthelis said proudly. Once your neural patterns are integrated, they'll be awakened, deployed throughout the galaxy as explorers, establishing Antlan presence on 100 worlds. Conquerors, Vyessa corrected. Pioneers, Anthelis insisted, bringing order to chaos, perfection to primitiveness. As they moved through the chamber, Vyessa noted the security systems, the power conduits, the environmental controls, all while appearing to be overwhelmed by the scale of the project. The transmitter relayed everything to the rebels. "And the council approved this?" she asked. "The same council that executes parents for unauthorized genetic modification?" "The council serves a purpose," Anthelus replied carefully. "They maintain order among the masses while we secure our species' future. What they don't know won't disrupt that order." So even they're being deceived. Visa realized only a select few know about this facility. "The visionaries," Anthelus confirmed, "those who understand that true perfection requires compromise." They returned to the main laboratory, where the technicians had completed their preparations. The neural mapping equipment waited, its purpose unmistakable even to someone unfamiliar with Antlan technology. "It's time, Visa," Anthelus said, his tone almost gentle. "Your contribution to Antella's future will be remembered, if not publicly acknowledged." As she was secured once more to the examination table, Visa felt a moment of despair. The rebels had the evidence they needed, but what good would exposure do if she couldn't prevent the activation of these perfect soldiers? The transmitter beneath her skin suddenly pulsed a signal from the rebels. They had received the transmission, understood the threat, and were implementing the second phase of the plan. Moments later, the facility's alarms activated not in response to an intrusion, but to an apparent system malfunction. Emergency protocols initiated, causing the stasis chambers to enter protective lockdown. "What's happening?" Anthelus demanded of the technicians. "Unknown system corruption," one replied, frantically working at a control panel. "The stasis fields are destabilizing if they fail completely." "Stabilize them," Anthelus ordered. "Nothing can happen to the Vanguard units." In the confusion, Visa noticed something the others missed: a maintenance access panel sliding open silently across the laboratory. From it emerged a figure she had not expected to see: Elias, moving with surprising stealth despite his injured leg. While Anthelus and the technicians were distracted by the system failure, Elias approached Visa's examination table, a small device in Honda Rebel modified security override. "I told you to stay at the hideout," Visa whispered as he worked to deactivate her restraints. "And I told you I wouldn't let you face this alone," he replied with a grim smile. "The rebels have launched a full system attack on the facility's network. It won't last long, but it should be enough." The restraints deactivated, and Visa sat up just as Anthelus turned back toward her. His expression transformed from concern to fury in an instant. "Hey, the human," he snarled, reaching for a weapon. "How?" Visa lunged forward, her enhanced strength allowing her to cross the distance between them before he could draw his weapon. She pinned him against a control panel, her asymmetrical face inches from his perfect features. "It's over, Anthelus," she said. "The evidence has been transmitted. All of Bastion will know what's happening beneath their sacred temple." "They'll never believe it," he gasped, struggling against her grip. "The word of aberrations and aliens against the religious council? They'll believe their eyes," Elias said, activating a communication device. "The rebels are broadcasting the feed from Visa's transmitter right now. Every screen in Bastion is showing your perfect soldiers, your hypocrisy." Anthelus's struggle ceased as the implications sank in. "You've doomed us all," he said quietly. "Without Vanguard Prime, Antella has no future among the stars." "There are other ways to reach the stars," Visa replied. "Ways that don't require sacrificing our ethics or each other." A new alarm sounded different from the system failure warning. This one signaled a security breach at the highest level. "That will be the Council's personal guards," Anthelus said with bitter satisfaction. "They may not have known about Vanguard Prime, but they'll still eliminate anyone who threatens the social order. You included." "Then we'd better not be here when they arrive," Elias said, moving toward the maintenance shaft. The rebels have cleared us a path back to the lower levels. Vyessa hesitated, looking at the stasis chamber containing the first Vanguard Prime unit, their perfect counterpart, sleeping in artificial perfection. What about them? She asked, gesturing to the chamber and the room beyond with its hundreds of identical forms. The system attack corrupted their development matrices, Elias explained. They'll never awaken as the weapons Anthelis intended. The rebels are working to modify the programming to give them choice, free will. More aberrations, Anthelis spat. You'll fill Antella with imperfection. With diversity, Vyessa corrected. With adaptation that comes from choice, not programming. She released him, stepping back. You can stay and face the Council's guards. Explain why you violated their most sacred laws. Or you can come with us. Anthelis straightened his uniform, his perfect features set in cold disdain. I would rather face judgment than join your chaotic vision of the future. Your choice, Vyessa said simply, following Elias to the maintenance shaft. That's what this has always been about, the right to choose one's own path, perfect or not. They escaped through the rebel-secured passages as the temple complex above them erupted in confusion. The broadcast had done its work. Antolins throughout Bastion were witnessing the hidden facility, the secret project, the hypocrisy of their religious leaders. In the rebel hideout, they found celebration mingled with tense preparation. Mira greeted them with grim satisfaction. The council is in chaos, she reported. The religious faction is denouncing the military faction. The military is denying knowledge, and the ordinary citizens are demanding answers. Will there be violence? Vyessa asked with concern. Some, inevitably, Mira admitted. But we've been preparing for this moment. Our people are positioned throughout the city, calling for peaceful transition, for dialogue rather than retribution. And the Vanguard units? Elias asked. The programming modifications are underway. It will take time, but they can be awakened safely, as individuals rather than weapons. Mira turned to Vyessa. They're your siblings, in a way. They deserve the chance you never had to determine their own purpose. A rebel technician approached with urgency. We've detected a signal response to the human's beacon. A ship has entered Antolon space. Elias's expression brightened with hope. My people, they found us. The Council's space defense systems are still active, Mira warned. They might view a human vessel as a threat, especially now. We need to warn them, Elias said, and provide landing coordinates away from the city, as plans were made to establish contact with the human ship. Vyessa found herself drawn to a reflective surface, not a broken mirror this time, but a polished panel that showed her image clearly. Her asymmetrical features, her uneven limbs, her skin with its irregular patterns of translucence. Elias appeared beside her, his reflection joining hers. What do you see? He asked gently. I see. Vyessa paused, considering. I see someone who is exactly who she needs to be. Not perfect, but complete in her imperfection. That's what I've seen from the beginning, Elias said, his hand finding hers. From the moment you pulled me from that crashed ship, I saw someone whole, not broken. Outside the rebel hideout, Bastion City was transforming. The revelation of the Vanguard Prime project had shattered centuries of religious doctrine about perfection and purity. The rigid stratification was crumbling as Antolons from all levels questioned what they had been taught. It would not be an easy transition. Generations of belief couldn't be undone in a day. But the first steps had been taken toward a society that might value adaptation over uniformity, diversity over conformity. The human ship established contact, agreeing to land in the wasteland away from the city. As preparations were made for Elias's reunion with his people, he and Vyessa stood on a high point overlooking Bastion. watching the sunset paint the spires in shades of deep crimson. "What will you do now?" Elias asked. "Return to the city?" "Not yet," Vyessa replied. "There's still too much anger, too much confusion. The vanguard units will need guidance when they awaken, someone who understands what it means to be different in a world obsessed with sameness." "You could come with me," Elias suggested. "Earth's colonies have learned to value difference. You would be welcomed." "I can't abandon Antella now, not when change is finally possible." She turned to him, her mismatched eyes reflecting the fading light. "But perhaps, when things are more stable here, when the vanguard units have found their place, perhaps then I could see these human colonies. I'll come back for you," Elias promised, "no matter how long it takes." "The human who stayed," Vyessa said with a smile, "even when I was broken." "Not broken," Elias corrected gently. "Perfectly imperfect, exactly as you should be." As darkness fell over Bastion City, lights began to appear not just in the upper levels as before, but throughout the entire structure, a constellation of illumination that bridged the once rigid divisions. A visual representation of the change beginning to take root in Antalan society. In the distance, the lights of the human ship descended through the atmosphere, a promise of connection beyond their world, of possibilities that transcended the limitations of any single definition of perfection. Vyessa and Elias stood together at this crossroads of their civilizations, their unlikely bond a testament to the power of acceptance of others and of oneself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the knowledge that true strength came not from flawlessness, but from the courage to embrace one's whole self. Differences and all. As the first stars appeared in the crimson sky, Vyessa looked up, seeing not exile but possibility in the vast expanse above. The universe was wide and varied, with room for all forms of life, all definitions of beauty, including hers. She was thrown away by her own kind, but she had found her place not despite her differences but because of them, and she was not alone, not anymore.